And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Friday, the 11th of March. And it's a bit of a cloudy day today here. And the prediction is for rain to be happening later this afternoon. So we'll see how it goes with that. Well, right now, let's get on with the news on this Friday. Because there's lots of functions and events that are taking place now. Once again, they all started to happening. Hey, but before I go, don't forget that today at 4 p.m. we'll have Suman Dua right here in the studios. And you can get all your migration questions answered for free. That's correct. You've had it right. So all you need to do is log on to Australian Indian Radio's Facebook page, as you have done now, and then just put your questions in the comment section and we will answer that, and Suman Dua will be here. And today, very interesting topics of all the states and of course the skills migration update, and together with all the audience questions. So with that, let's get this show on the road today, the 11th day of March 2011. And of course, there's lots of things that are happening out there, but first of all, let's look at the power play in defence with Anthony Albanese.
You shouldn't get credit for spending money that doesn't produce anything. And that's what's happened. They've spent money on deals with Japan, France, other equipment that hasn't resulted in defence materiel being produced. Whilst this government has, it's true, spent money, the outcomes is the problem. The gap that's there between the announcement and the delivery.
ABC political reporter James Glenday is with me. James, how would you describe Anthony Albanese's foreign policy manifesto overall?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting speech today, Lee, because this is effectively a blueprint for what they're going to do if they win the election. I think the main messages weren't that surprising. The opposition is going to promise to seek bipartisanship where it can on national security. Anthony Albanese again hit out at Scott Morrison for trying to politicise it. He said a future Labor government would try to strengthen our democratic institutions so that we're better prepared and better equipped to fend off any kind of foreign meddling or attempts to divide us as a nation. He was even more strident than he has been in his criticism of China, again saying that Beijing should be criticising Russia more strongly for its invasion of Ukraine, and he fairly broadly praised the United States for its role in the world. Not surprising again, but significant in the way that he did it. Probably the main headline out of all of this, though, was the pledge to keep defence spending at above 2% of GDP, and substantially above that probably because he again committed entirely to Labor supporting nuclear submarines and acquiring nuclear submarines. The basic message from the opposition was, we're going to spend what is required. A few weeks ago, perhaps that wouldn't have been entirely supported behind the scenes in Labor, but given what we've seen in Ukraine, this attempt to overturn the rules-based order, we're not going to see any public dissent over this at all.
Governments and oppositions often try to magnify the differences between them, even when they don't really exist. As you mentioned, foreign policy is usually an area of bipartisan agreement. Are there really any differences between Labor and the coalition in a policy sense going into this election?
No, there's not really at all, and that's quite deliberate. The opposition has tried to make sure that there is no real daylight at all between what it's proposing on national security and what the government is proposing. It knows that the coalition wants to run not just on national security, but also how national security can help protect the economy. So basically lives and livelihoods. But what was interesting today to see from the opposition leader was how stridently he criticised the government over some of its defence programs that are either blown out or gone over budget, and point out that some of the things that the coalition is promising aren't going to be delivered for many, many years, perhaps until 2040. And basically the message that Anthony Albanese is trying to get across is effectively accusing the Prime Minister of being all about marketing and spin and announcements and not about actual delivery. And I think it'll be interesting to see how much Labor campaigns during the election campaign on that record of delivery. It wants to draw a difference between itself and the government on that.
James Glenday, thank you.
And whether there is that difference or not is going to be very, very interesting as we move into this campaigning phase. Well, as long as always they blame gamekers. But okay, right now, here in Queensland, the housing crisis looms after this affected floods. Let's take a look at that report.
This is one of Greater Brisbane's worst affected suburbs. The people who live here had to wait more than a week after the floodwaters peaked for the clean-up to begin. And Douglas Gooding is working hard to make his home livable again. How are you going, Douglas?
Mentally, yeah. I've broken down a couple of times over it all. Just little things that's just tripped it off.
But the Goodna resident still has ambitious plans.
We're leaving that. We can still use that. That's all in operation.
But realistically, when do you think you can move back in here?
I'm hoping 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks.
Douglas Gooding and his neighbours have been through this before, when floodwaters destroyed the suburb in 2011. And when 730 visited these streets 6 months later, residents told us the recovery had barely started.
Most of us are sort of back, but we're not in houses and stuff. I mean, people over there, they're living under their house.
11 years later, that same Goodna resident, Damien Main, is preparing to say goodbye to his home. His insurance company insists the house be demolished.
They said they won't rebuild because it's a floodplain. They're not going to even fathom that.
How realistic is it to rebuild some of those houses?
Look, that's going to be an issue that council, we will work with councils, state will work with councils to understand what is viable, what is not viable, but that will take time.
The Queensland Premier has appointed Major General Jake Elwood to oversee Queensland's flood recovery. He's seen firsthand the challenge ahead for Goodna, but it's just one of hundreds of communities that are reeling from the crisis.
There are multiple tasks that need to be done over 22 local government areas. It is massive.
Everything that's come out of your place, is it?
It's a job that will require coordination between all three levels of government, as acknowledged by the Prime Minister, who visited flood-damaged parts of Brisbane today.
What always happens with disasters is along the way, once you're doing this, other needs come up, and so we'll hopefully that's one of the reasons I'm here, is to understand what those other needs are.
One of the most pressing needs is finding places for thousands of displaced people to live. Community groups are bracing themselves for a further squeeze on housing, and they were struggling even before the disaster.
It is, I know, very, very difficult. The biggest problem I think we have is where do we refer on?
Well, obviously there's going to be less housing for a longer period because they've got to rebuild what they've got and they've got to house the people whilst they're rebuilding and fixing up the homes and some of these homes won't be able to be rebuilt.
With his house due for demolition, Damien Main is struggling to work out his next move. This is what his Goodna home looked like as the waters were receding 8 days ago. And since the floods, he and his wife have been staying with their extended family.
I know, look, I've got lovely people looking after us. I don't deny any of that. But like we've all said, we need our own space. My wife being disabled makes it 10 times harder.
How seriously do you worry about where you're going to live in the future?
Pretty serious. Me and my wife just fight all the time over where we're going to go. But at the moment, with houses going like this, we're out of the range.
Major General Elwood says South East Queensland is barely into the recovery stage, and it's too early to assess the size of the pending housing crisis.
Over time, when we understand which houses will be tenable, which will not be tenable, and therefore will need to be repaired or whatever, then I think we'll get a better understanding of the scale.
It is going to be a big problem, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Look, there will be a myriad of issues.
Douglas Gooding is determined to solve his own housing problem. Last week, 7:30 caught up with him and his mother while they were staying at a soccer club building in a neighbouring suburb. He's still sleeping there, but he's itching to move back to Goodna with his mum, stepdad and brother. Does a part of you feel like we should move out of a flood zone since we've been hit twice in just over 10 years?
No, because I like the area. I know I have got family and friends around here. I've got the moral support of the soccer club. They've helped me out big time through this, so yeah.
Again, they're surrounded by a community. The other thing I noticed was that there were so many around supporting, and I think that to me is what Australia's about.
Douglas Gooding accepts he will need government support, on top of what he hopes is a payout from house insurance. But he's determined to make it work.
We want to stay here. Mum wants to stay here. She said it's her home. And we've been here 34 years, since 88, and this is our home.
And that is their home. Such heartbreaking news coming out of there, the good old Goodna. And of course, when we look at the houses in the olden days, especially around here in Queensland, they used to make houses on stilts, the high-set homes, and you had the timber slats on the side to let the water go underneath. And then people said, why did they have houses like that? So that's the reason why, so that they were high above and they were not built on the ground. These days, the slab on ground is hardly about 300 to 350, 400 above the ground level, which is outside. And often people have the ground coverings, they have new turf put in and things like that, then slowly build up. And those weep holes and other things get covered as well. Yes, those old ones looked different, but they were built that way for a purpose. Well, right now, moving on with the news on this Friday, let's now take a look at what's been happening, with the unification calls, by helicopter pilots in the wake of these floods in New South Wales. Why can't we all be unified and have one simple rule?
This is not my show. This is just people, right? For me, it started going down to the emergency centre that our community set up in Mullen, and hearing a friend whose child was ill, struggling to get a helicopter. The next thing you know, call a friend who's got a helicopter, get the helicopter. And one thing led to another. We then grew from one machine to then Jess and the Rotor Wings crew came in, and then the V2 crew heard about it and raised money and came in. And next thing you know, I'm moving along from a guy who's trying to get one child out of a location because the services aren't prepared, to managing a whole range. That's where I came from. And then I'm representing today with permission community leaders that have done the ground clean-up, ground response and ground thing. And the message we really want to pass is we need unification. We need communities to realise that we need to prepare ourselves for this more and more, and we need a lot less resistance between us and the agencies. And I was able to pull together a meeting yesterday that I think is a step of that, and really drop the narrative and the message of the us and them and the polarisation, which is hard considering what we've been through for the last couple of years, So that's really what our community wanted to push towards you guys, is that there's a potential here to prepare for this stuff, because communities are going to need to be ready for this again in 5, 10, 15 years.
And very well said. That is something which I always strive for and work towards, is getting that unification. There should not be the us and them mentality, but alas, that does happen a lot. What do we do? So I think that's a very good call on there to say that, we need to be unified, that unification is very, very necessary. Well, right now, another shocking news that has come out is that, the Labor Senator Kimberly Kitching, and her passing away, 52 years of age, of heart attack. And here's what Anthony Albanese had to say.
It's something that was just totally unexpected. Kimberly was just 52 years of age. She was just beginning, really, her political career. It was her first term serving in the Senate. I appointed her to the front bench and gave her additional responsibilities when I became the leader. And Kimberly was someone who lit up a room when she was there. She was so full of life. She was a vivacious character. And to lose her so young is just an enormous shock.
And it is a shock to the nation as well, because, we had Rod Mars, now Shane Warne, and now the Kimberly Sau, and all three, the last three that I mentioned, have been victims of heart attack. So this is maybe, we're looking at all these areas and all the things. So I think the health is very, very important. So talking about health, how worried should we be about this new virus, which is borne by mosquitoes?
Everybody's just shocked. At the moment, can't think about life moving forward. My husband of 30 years, and we've rarely been apart. He's such a good man. He is such a wonderful husband and a great friend to many.
After helping her husband David recover from cancer and now living with a chronic illness herself, Jackie Monk never expected to be here, preparing to visit him in hospital on life support.
Around the 16th of February, David had achy joints. He didn't really seem to understand basic questions and he seemed quite weak. And I thought, what the hell is going on?
A few days after falling ill, David Kiefel was airlifted to the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne from his hometown of Corowa on the New South Wales-Victoria border. He was diagnosed with Japanese encephalitis, a virus spread by mosquitoes that's rare in Australia but prevalent in parts of Southeast Asia. It was given the name because it was first spotted in Japan in the 1930s. While severe illness from the virus is very rare, for those who do become ill, there's no specific treatment or cure.
The symptoms we're most concerned about are fever, headache, confusion or weakness, or seizures. Now, of course, if people have those more severe symptoms, they need to go to hospital.
The virus appeared in Australia last month and has now been seen in 21 piggeries in Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia and Queensland. Currently, 10 people are sick and 2 have died.
Most people who get infected from a mosquito actually don't become very unwell. Might not get any symptoms, but about something in the order of 1 in 100 people infected, this virus goes to the brain or spinal cord. And if it goes to the brain or spinal cord, it can make people very sick, put them into intensive care and even die.
Jackie is distraught at the thought of losing her husband. She lives with fibromatosis and her husband is her primary carer.
The Japanese encephalitis has affected his brain and his spinal column. I don't think he has any idea of where he is or what is going on. I don't think he knew who I was. And it's really hard to rationalise that this can happen from a mozzie bite in such a sophisticated country as Australia.
This week she drove down from the couple's hometown to see her husband in hospital. Their town, Corowa, is near one of the piggeries where the mosquito-borne virus has been detected. However, the couple don't know where David contracted the illness.
Considerable rainfall has created ideal conditions for the emergence and spread of Japanese encephalitis virus. The water provides habitat for the birds that are a reservoir of the virus and the mosquitoes that spread it from the birds to pigs and potentially to people.
Recent rains have exacerbated the problem, but the emergence of the virus has still shocked researchers as it's never before been seen in southern Australia.
It was a real surprise for us to find activity of Japanese encephalitis virus in Australia. We've seen cases, only a very small number of Japanese encephalitis viruses in around Cape York, the furthest north of Australia.
The company that runs Corowa's piggery declined to comment. But a spokesperson for the Australian pork industry told 7:30 the industry is working closely with governments to prioritise safety of staff and the welfare of animals, and that people cannot catch the virus by eating pork. With no specific treatment available for the virus, Jackie's husband David is fighting for his life here at Melbourne's Alfred Hospital, and the next few days will be critical. A spokesperson for the Federal Agriculture Department told 7:30 that tracing is underway at piggeries, and the Health Department said that Japanese encephalitis vaccinations will be offered for workers in high-risk areas.
You could tell that he was there yesterday. The man that we know and love isn't there anymore. I believe that his spirit's already halfway to heaven. The virus has obviously progressed and probably run its course. It's just unfair that, you know, a good person that we all love and care for so much is going to more than likely have, as his wishes state, for us to remove life support.
Experts say that while the risk of becoming ill from the virus is low, people in affected regions should protect themselves from mosquito bites by wearing long clothing and repellent. There's hope the risk will subside as the seasons change and floodwaters recede.
As the weather cools here in Australia, mosquito populations will decline and the risk of transmission will decline with that. But we'll also see activity in northern areas of New South Wales and southern Queensland where mosquito populations are expected to continue for many weeks to come. There's many more questions to answer yet and understand about this virus and the future risks to Australia.
That's a future risk there, and through the mosquitoes and of course the piggeries and the pig farms there. Well, right now let's looking at the time as well, so we might as well take a look at the Ukraine situation with Dennis Dunlop.
Russian forces have been heavily bombing the city of Mariupol in Ukraine's southeast for the 9th day today. The city is under siege and Ukraine's government says it's the most critical situation of this war, which is saying a lot given the sorts of things we're seeing come out of other parts of the country. Yesterday, as you said, we saw that bombing of the maternity and children's wards of the hospital, and it's since been confirmed that at least 3 people have died, including a 6-year-old girl, and at least 17 people were injured, including pregnant women. Russia has come out in defence of the attack, claiming Ukrainian forces had occupied the building. It says it was no longer being used as a hospital, but we've all seen those pictures that went around the world from that attack showing bloodied pregnant women and doctors being carried out of the wreckage. So the Kremlin is investigating that attack. It's confirmed it is investigating that attack. We're also seeing pictures emerge elsewhere out of that city of mass graves, totally destroyed apartment buildings and entire residential areas flattened. And city officials, as you said, say that 1,200 bodies have been recovered from the streets in just the last few days alone. The Red Cross says food and water are in short supply, such short supply that residents are attacking each other, are turning on each other because they're so desperate. And yet again, there was supposed to be a ceasefire in that city today, but yet again it didn't happen. People weren't able to escape from that city. And the US ambassador to the UN has also come out today and said that the US is documenting war crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine against Ukraine's civilians.
Yeah, we won't hold our breath about that Kremlin investigation. Ukraine and Russia's foreign ministers held talks today again. Was anything of note achieved?
Look, the talks today were the highest level discussions held between Ukraine and Russia since the war began 2 weeks ago. They were held in Turkey. Turkey is a NATO member, but it sees itself as a neutral party and is trying to facilitate negotiations, but that was to no end. There was no progress on a ceasefire and no progress on humanitarian corridors out of Mariupol. So little progress at all. There were, though, temporary ceasefires elsewhere today in besieged regions of Ukraine, and overall 65,000 people have been evacuated so far. And here are a few figures from the war that I find extraordinary. Half of the capital Kiev's population of about 1.9 million people have escaped so far. Sorry, 2.9 million people. Half of that population have escaped so far as Russian troops surround the capital in a pincer movement. And now more than 2.3 million people have fled the country, according to the UN.
Some extraordinary figures there, those numbers fleeing the country. Well, thank you so much, Robert Dunlop, for that update and for that report. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's time now to go to our daily India report. There might be some interesting election results in the section.
Welcome to Daily India Report that brings you glimpses of the changing India. In our first story, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Bharatiya Janata Party have wrested control again in 4 of the 5 states that went to polls in the past month. It is clear that the BJP will take back Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Manipur and Goa. Aam Aadmi Party has risen in national stature with a projected resounding victory in the state of Punjab, displacing the Congress. The grand old party of India seems to be losing the connect with voters, evident in its dismal performance in 4 states other than Goa. Many astute pundits and exit polls had forecast these victories, though in varying degrees. A huge effort by former Chief Minister Akhilesh Yadav has at least put Samajwadi Party in a distinct opposition position in Uttar Pradesh. These assembly elections were labelled by Modi's critics as midterm polls before India's general elections that are just about 2 years away. Prime Minister Modi and UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath have proved their mettle and perhaps signalled their victory in 2024. Elections for state assemblies in the 5 Indian states of Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Goa and Manipur were conducted between 10th February and 7th March. Counting began on the morning of 10th March. Here are election results so far in 690 constituencies in which elections were held. In India's largest state with the biggest population, Uttar Pradesh, Prime Minister Modi and Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath left no stone unturned in politicking, campaigning, executing projects and most importantly ensuring that the Ram temple in Ayodhya began construction. Former Chief Minister and young Yadav scion Akhilesh raised the bar with a hard-hitting campaign that put a lot of pressure on Modi, Yogi and BJP. The entire BJP party, its top officials and all central ministers stormed the state and neighbouring Uttarakhand that was carved out of UP a couple of decades ago. It was a do or die battle. Modi and Yogi proved their formidable combination, some pundits say. At the close of production for this show, the results were as follows. The biggest shakeout took place in the state of Punjab. BJP didn't expect to do well and didn't do much. Former Chief Minister and breakaway Congress leader Amrinder Singh leaving amid infighting in party caused Congress to lose badly. Aam Aadmi Party, led by Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal, rose to national stature by claiming the second state. It most definitely and defiantly dislodged Congress and others and will form government in the state. In Uttar Pradesh, the Bharatiya Janata Party is set for a resounding victory. BJP is inching towards a record second consecutive term and is leading in 261 seats of the 403 seats assembly. In Uttarakhand, the Bharatiya Janata Party, with changed chief ministers 3 times, is leading in 48 seats of the 70 seats. In the coastal state of Goa, BJP is set to come back to power as it is leading in 20 seats of the 40 seats. It is likely to draw independents and others in a coalition. In the northeastern state of Manipur, the Bharatiya Janata Party is set to get simple majority as it is leading in 30 of the total 60 seats. But a large number of independents are likely to throw their weight behind the BJP. In Punjab, the Aam Aadmi Party routed the incumbent Congress Party. AAP leads in 92 seats of the total 117 seats. It is clear that the Indian National Congress Party has suffered its worst and most humiliating defeat ever in these elections. Meanwhile, the assembly results have buoyed the Indian stock market, which, like other global markets, has been hit hard by the war in Ukraine. On elections results day, on 10th March, stocks opened higher and jumped nearly 3% in the opening trade. There was an overall bullish trend also in global markets. The 30-share BSE benchmark index closed at 55,464.39. Similarly, the NSE Nifty jumped 249.55 points. India's drug regulator has granted restricted emergency use authorization to Serum Institute of India's COVID-19 vaccine Covovax for the 12 to 17 years age group. India's drug regulator has granted restricted emergency use authorization to the Serum Institute of India's COVID-19 vaccine Covovax for the 12 to 17 years age group, subject to certain conditions. It is the fourth vaccine to receive the regulator's nod for use among those below 18 years. The Drugs Controller General of India's approval comes after the Subject Expert Committee on COVID-19 of the CDSCO recommended granting emergency use authorization. The government has still not taken a decision on vaccinating those aged below 15 years. The Health Ministry has consistently said that additional needs for vaccination and inclusion of population for vaccination are examined constantly. In the EUA application to DCGI, SII on February 21st had stated that the data from two studies on about 2,707 children aged 12 to 17 years show that Covovax is highly efficacious, immunogenic, safe and well tolerated in this age group of children. The DCGI has already approved Covovax for restricted use in emergency situations in adults on December 28th. It has not yet been included in the country's vaccination drive. The DCGI on February 21st granted restricted EUA to Biological E's COVID-19 vaccine Covovax for the 12 to less than 18 years age group, subject to certain conditions. Covovax is manufactured by technology transfer from Novavax and is approved by the European Medicines Agency for conditional marketing authorization and also for emergency use listing by WHO on December 17, 2020. India has been using Bharat Biotech's Covaxin to vaccinate adolescents between 15 to 18 years. Zycov-D is the first vaccine cleared by India's drug regulator for inoculation of those aged 12 years and above in August last year. Indigenously developed Covaxin received approval for emergency use among 12 to 18 years aged in December last year. The Government of India approved the establishment of the WHO Global Centre for Traditional Medicine in Jamnagar city in Gujarat state. A host country agreement was signed with the World Health Organization. India's Union Cabinet of Ministers, chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has approved the establishment of a WHO Global Centre for Traditional Medicine. This would be the first and only global outposted centre for traditional medicine across the globe. The deal was done between the Government of India and the World Health Organization by signing a host country agreement, the official statement said. On 13th November 2020, WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom had announced the establishment of a WHO GCTM in India. Modi has claimed that the centre would emerge as a centre of global wellness, bolster evidence-based research, training and awareness for traditional medicine. The official statement mentioned that a joint task force has been constituted for coordination, execution and monitoring of activities for the establishment of this centre. JTF comprises representatives from the Government of India, Permanent Mission of India, Geneva and the World Health Organization. The Government of India has imposed curbs on imports of hydrofluorocarbons that are used in refrigeration and air conditioning. This is done to boost domestic manufacturing of the chemical. India has imposed curbs on imports of hydrofluorocarbons used in refrigeration and air conditioning to boost domestic manufacturing of the chemical. Importers will now have to seek a license or permission from the Directorate to import this chemical. The move assumes significance as the government has extended a rupees 6,238 crore PLI scheme for white goods to boost the manufacturing of components and sub-assemblies of ACs and LED lights. In a separate notification, the DGFT said that the export of rice to EU member states and other European countries, namely Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Switzerland, will require a certificate of inspection from EIA or EIC. Emerging from COVID-19, Bollywood fans are thrilled with a slew of films coming up for release. Latest is the release of trailer of Jalsa starring Vidya Balan and Shefali Shah. The trailer of the thriller gives a peek into chaos around its two lead characters, Maya, essayed by Vidya Balan, and Rukhsana by Shefali. Bollywood stars Shefali Shah and Vidya Balan are back with the first trailer of their film Jalsa. The two are shown to be connected to each other by a murder case. The gripping story revolves around the killing of a young girl and a news channel investigating it. While Shefali Shah plays the mother of the victim who refuses to give up on her daughter, Vidya plays a journalist who is looking into the story. The almost 2-minute trailer opens with a young girl being chased by a man but ends up being hit by a car. As the police and a media house start investigating the case, Shefali makes an impact as a brave mother, Rukhsana, who is in no mood to judge her daughter for being out late at night. On the other hand, a journalist briefs her boss Maya about the story. While Vidya takes a keen interest in the same, a man is seen telling her in the latter part of the trailer that it's better to hide a story these days. The trailer ends with a kid telling someone, "I know everything. If you would give me a chocolate, I won't tell anyone." It also seems to turn into a duel between truth and lies, redemption and retribution. Directed by Suresh Triveni of the Tumhari Sulu fame, the film is produced by T-Series and Abundantia Entertainment. Jalsa will premiere on Amazon Prime on March 18. That's all for this bulletin of Daily India Report.
And thank you very much, Himanshu, for that report. Well, yes, as you have seen, those results in India. So 4 out of the 5 states election went to BJP, and a resounding success for AAP in Punjab. So, that was sort of predicted, and that is why BJP did not do much in Punjab itself. But it's a demise of Congress in Punjab. But anyway, it will be interesting to see how things progress from here on. Right now, because we're getting onto the weekend, let's take a look at what are the functions and events that are going to be taking place. And here's some of them. And there you are, ladies and gentlemen, up to date on Australian Indian Radio. Just a little bit of a notice about that Brisbane Holi that is now been further postponed. As per this, the notice, it says Saturday's 19th March. It is not happening on the 19th March. So if you have bought tickets, you would have received that notification that it is now in April. So we will update that poster as well. Well, right now it's time to say goodbye. It is Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. There's so much which is happening out there. Once again, things are easing up a little bit, and so there's a lot more people out and about. But of course, you should always take care and observe those health facilities as much as you can. Try and do the right thing from your side. Try and keep safe. Of course, go out and enjoy what needs to be done, but we should never be forgetful, and we should never forget that these signs are only not far away at all. So the other point is that tonight at 4 p.m. We have Sumandua coming right here. So you get all your migration-related questions answered live. All you'll have to do is log in at 4 p.m. For the live segment. You can watch it afterwards as well, but for your questions, it's always best that if you log in while we on air so that we can answer your migration-related questions with Sumandua. And what's going to happen is you in the comment section, you can put down your questions and we'll answer those questions there. Later on, you can send messages to Suman to answer your questions. But that free answering of your questions is available to you during the show. So hopefully we'll see you back at 4 p.m. today with Migration Ka Safar with Sumandua. And moving into the weekend, thank God it's Friday, and looking at the weekend, which is going to be great, with a warning that there might be some rain pockets as well. So if you're going out, even though it might not be raining at that time, make sure you take your brolly, that you are prepared. So until 4 p.m. today, at Migration Ka Safar, it's goodbye from me. We'll see you all then. It's always wonderful to have your company.